We continue now at the top of Daf Ayin Aleph Amid Beis in Meseches Bava Basra. This is Bava Basra Daf 71b. On the previous summit, the Gemara said that if a person sells a field but he keeps for himself 2 trees, even though normally if a person just sells 2 trees, that doesn't come along with land. The buyer doesn't get the land as well, he just gets the trees. But where the seller is retaining for himself 2 trees within the land that he's selling, so then he gets some land to accompany the trees as well. And even according to the one who says that a person sells generously, but that's not true in this particular situation. In this particular situation, it's understood that the seller is going to retain some of the land for himself, because if the tree should die, he would want to replant another one. And the idea is that trees in general can weaken the land. And so the Gemara says, Emisa de lo shire, if it was true that he didn't leave for himself some of the land, leimole, so then the buyer would say to him, Akori loncha, shkol vazil, he would say, uproot your trees and get out of here. When the trees die, I don't want you to replant another one. And so therefore it is assumed in this particular situation that the seller is retaining for himself some rights to the land. And the Rashbam says, Emisa de lo shire, va'anon sahadi, we are witnesses, that he is leaving the trees for himself with this intention, that the trees should be here all the time, and he would even want the right to replant others in their place if these should die. That's the same strength he had with these trees before. When he was the owner of all the property, he certainly could have replanted new trees when the old trees die. And so the same thing over here, when he's retaining for himself 2 trees, it's understood in this case that he's retaining for himself some land as well. But let's say it's the other way around. Let's say a person is buying just the trees. When you're not going to say that the buyer is thinking that he wants this forever, that he's going to be able to replant trees if these die. That's not the understanding. It makes sense that a person would buy something just for this time period. The point is that he wants the produce of this particular tree, but there's no understanding in that case that he wants to have the right to be able to replant the tree. And so again, that's why it's different in this particular situation where the seller is retaining for himself the rights to the trees. And the Gemara continues, Tanan, we learned in our Mishnah, and this Mishnah is being brought as a question against what Rav Huna said. Again, Rav Huna is saying that the seller retains for himself the land around the 2 trees. So our Mishnah said, Rabbi Shimon says, Hamakdish as hasada, if somebody consecrates his field, lo hikdish ela chorav hamurka v'sadan hashikma. In addition to the field, the only other things that are consecrated are the carob tree that's grafted and the sycamore trunk. Only those are consecrated along with the field, but all other things that are generally not included within the sale of the field are also not included in this consecration. V'tani alon, we learned on this, Amar Rabbi Shimon says, Matam, what's the reason why specifically the chorav hamurkov and the sadan hashikma, why are they consecrated, why are they considered hektish along with the rest of the field? Hoel v'yonkin misada hektish, because otherwise they'd be drawing nutrients from the field of hektish, meaning to say, the Charav HaMurkav and the Sadan HaShikma, they're taking nutrients from the ground. Now, if this field is consecrated, if it's hektish, it would not be appropriate that they're going to be drawing the nutrients away from the property of hektish, so they too must be included in the hektish. They are hektish as well, just like the rest of the field. That's the reasoning of Rabbi Shimon. And so the Gemara now asks its question on Rav Huna. Now, if it enters your mind, Shiyure Shire, that a seller is going to retain, let's say there are 2 trees, a seller is going to retain for himself the trees, and not only the trees, but the land as well. And so in this case also, when it comes to the charav, if we're going to treat it just like a seller, when it comes to the charav hamurkav and the sadan hashikma, the person consecrates his field, and he retains for himself the charav hamurkav and the sadan hashikma, those 2 kinds of trees, and he will retain for himself the land as well. Ki kayanki midanafshe kayanki, according to what Rav Huna said on the previous summit, when they're taking nutrients it's from his own land, from land that he retains for himself when he also kept for himself these 2 trees. And so therefore this is a question on Rav Huna, because again Rav Huna said that no matter who you follow, even if you say that a person sells generously, but when he sells his field and he retains for himself 2 trees, he does leave for himself the land as well. Here it seems like he does not retain the land. And the Gemara answers, Rabbi Shimon Damar Rabbi Akiva. You're going to have to say that actually Rabbi Shimon is following Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva again is the one who says that in general, when a person sells, he sells generously. And Rabbi Shimon says the same thing. When a person sells, or in this case, when a person is makdish, he's he's being makdish generously, and therefore, if he's going to leave for himself the trees, he's going to be generous on the land. He's not going to leave for himself the land, which would be problematic, because then the trees would be taking nutrients from the consecrated land, and that's why Rabbi Shimon says the Charv HaMurkav and the Sad and Hashikma are hektish as well. The Rav Huna and Rav Huna da'amar karabban, and you're going to have to say that Rav Huna is not following everyone, even though on the previous Amud we said Rav Huna is following according to all opinions. It's not true. Rav Huna was saying within the shita of the Rabbanan that a person does not sell generously. So within that shita, when a person sells a field and retains for himself 2 trees, he's going to keep some land for himself as well. But the Gemara continues Kirabbanan. If you're saying that Rav Huna is only following within the shita of the Rabbanan, so pshita isn't that so obvious? Of course, if the Rabbanan say that a person does not sell generously, so of course it's going to be true in this case. When the person sells the field and he keeps for himself the 2 trees, he's going to keep the land for those trees as well. And the Gemara says it's not necessarily so obvious. Nafkamina, the difference is the inafli hadar shasalu, that if these trees fall down, he's able to replant, he's able to put new trees in their place. And the Rashbam explains v'kamitama kirabbanam shita. The Gemara asks, according to the Rabbanan, that's too obvious. Kavan deve'ein ra mocher, since according to the Rabbanan, when a person sells, a person does not sell generously. V'yo dematzi lokeach l'meim orlei akar ilon chashkol v'zil. And plus, in this particular case, the buyer can say, get your trees out of here. Why? Mishum dekam makach shibiara, because the trees are actually weakening the earth. Over here, there's even more reason we should say that there's an issue. Kal v'chomer hu legabe bor v'dos the lo makach shibiara. It's the kal v'chomer, because when it comes to the case of the pit and the cistern that he's retaining, they're not weakening the land at all. V'afilu hachi amri rabbanan, and still the Rabbanan say the shayer derech liatzmo lebor ledos. So the Rabbanan say that when it comes to the seller retaining the bor and the dos, he also leaves for himself a derech, a path. So kol shekin gabe ilan, certainly by a tree where the tree is going to weaken the land, he's certainly retaining for himself some of the land. That seems so obvious. What is Rav Huna even adding? And the Gemara answers nafkamina had Rav Huna. What Rav Huna is adding is the asal ashmin, and he's teaching us aliba de Rabbanan the shayer karka liatzmo. What we mean to say according to the Rabbanan that he's leaving himself some land, the inafli hadar shasalahu, that if the trees fall, he can replant others in their place. The ilav de Rav Huna, because if not for Rav Huna, I might have thought shayer ilonos lefanav yesh lo karka kol yemei kiyum, that what it means that he has the trees for himself means to say he gets the land as long as those trees are around, not necessarily to plant others in their place. And we will continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Ayin Beis Amud Aleph.